All right, Grandpa, we get it. You drove one of these before the invention of color. Thanks for the history lesson. But the adults have this covered, the words, slick with the casual arrogance of youth, cut through the clamor of the modern workshop. Arthur Wilson flinched, not outwardly, but deep inside where old wounds resided. He pulled his worn janitor's cart back, the squeak of the wheel a pathetic counterpoint to the confident clatter of digital calipers and socket wrenches. He was just the old man who swept the floors, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, invisible to the vibrant, strutting peacocks of modern mechanics. They saw his stooped shoulders, the tremor in his gnarled hands, and the faded blue of his eyes, and they saw a relic. They didn't see the man who once held the fate of a dozen others in those same shaky hands. If you believe every generation owes a debt of respect to the one that came before, type honor in the comments below. Arthur had been on this base for 20 years, long after his uniform was retired. He'd watched it transform from a place of gritty, oil-stained practicality to this sterile, gleaming laboratory of warfare. The mechanics now were more like IT specialists, their toolboxes filled with laptops and diagnostic scanners. He took a quiet pride in the immaculate floors he kept, a small, orderly corner in a world that had outpaced him. His life was a simple, quiet rhythm of sweeping, mopping, and emptying trash bins. He spoke little, and few spoke to him, save for a polite nod or a perfunctory greeting. He was part of the background, a fixture like the humming fluorescent lights or the faint smell of industrial cleaner. He had long ago made peace with his anonymity. He knew what he had done, where he had been. The medals were tucked away in a dusty box in his small apartment, silent testaments to a past no one here could even imagine. He didn't need their applause, but the casual, biting dismissal from the young staff sergeant. It still stung, tasted like ash, like the bitter memory of being forgotten. The object of their frustration, and the source of Arthur's pain, sat in the center of the main hangar bay like a time traveler. It was a 1943 Willys MB Jeep, painstakingly restored for the upcoming Founders' Day parade. It was a perfect specimen, gleaming in olive drab paint, its white star stark and proud on the hood. But it was silent. For 3 days, the base's best young technicians had swarmed it, their confidence slowly eroding into a seething, collective frustration. They had checked the pristine wiring with multimeters, tested the spark plugs, and even attempted to hook up a diagnostic tablet. A move so absurd it made Arthur's teeth ache. They were treating a masterpiece of simple, rugged engineering like a temperamental modern sedan. They spoke a language of sensors and computer codes. The Jeep spoke a language of mechanics, of steel and spark and soul, a language they had never been taught. Arthur had watched them from a distance, his hands itching with the memory of how these machines felt, how they breathed. He knew what was wrong. He could almost hear the Jeep whispering its complaint to him. A subtle misalignment, a finicky choke, a flooded carburetor. He had tried to offer a suggestion, a gentle nudge in the right direction, and for his trouble, he had been branded Grandpa. The tension in the hangar thickened with each passing hour. Staff Sergeant Kyle Redding, the leader of the group, slammed a wrench onto a nearby workbench, the clang echoing his fury. He was sharp, certified on the latest stealth fighters and armored vehicles, a rising star in his field. This primitive lawnmower on wheels was making him look like a fool, and he hated it. The fuel pump is fine, the ignition coil is new, the battery is fully charged. There is no logical reason why it won't turn over, he announced to his team, his voice tight with suppressed rage. His eyes flicked over to where Arthur was quietly sweeping metal shavings near the bay door. He saw the old man watching, and a fresh wave of irritation washed over him. It felt like judgment, like the old-timer was silently mocking his failure. Something to add, Wilson? Kyle's voice was laced with sarcasm. Maybe we should try hitting it with a rock? Is that how you guys did it on the Ark? A few of his subordinates snickered, avoiding Arthur's gaze. Arthur simply shook his head softly and continued his sweeping, the rhythmic scrape of the bristles against the concrete a calming, familiar sound. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He would endure, just as he had always endured. His silence, however, only seemed to infuriate the young sergeant more. It was the silence of knowledge, and Kyle felt it as a personal insult. The situation escalated when the base commander's aide, a crisp, no-nonsense captain, marched into the hangar. "Sergeant Redding, General Miller wants a status update. He's expecting to see that vehicle leading the parade in 48 hours. It's for the memorial dedication to Colonel Wainwright. The colonel's family is flying in. He drove a jeep just like that across France." This is not optional. The captain's words hung in the air, each one a lead weight. The pressure was now immense. Failure was not just a technical problem. It was a matter of honor, a stain on the entire maintenance wing. Kyle's face paled. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, his bravado finally cracking. "We're doing everything we can, sir. The machine, it's just not cooperating." It was a weak excuse, and he knew it. As the captain left, a heavy gloom settled over the team. They were beaten. Just then, a gleaming black staff car pulled up to the hangar, its arrival unannounced. The rear door opened, and out stepped a man whose presence immediately commanded the attention of the entire room. It was General Miller himself, a tall, imposing figure with 2 stars on his collar and an expression that could cut steel. He surveyed the scene. The defeated technicians, the inert jeep, and the quiet janitor by the door. General Miller's eyes swept across the hangar, landing on the dejected group of technicians. "Report, Sergeant," he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Kyle snapped to attention, his face flushed with shame. "Sir, we've been unable to start the vehicle. We've checked every system. We believe there may be a catastrophic internal failure we can't diagnose without a full teardown." The general's gaze narrowed. He walked slowly around the jeep, his polished boots clicking on the concrete. He ran a hand over the fender, a flicker of something, nostalgia, perhaps, in his eyes. Then, his gaze drifted past the defeated sergeant and settled on the old man in the gray jumpsuit. He stopped. His stern expression softened, replaced by one of utter disbelief, then dawning recognition. "Arthur?" he said, his voice suddenly quiet, almost gentle. "Arthur Wilson? My God, is that really you?" The technicians stared, utterly bewildered. Kyle's jaw went slack. The general of the entire base knew the janitor's name. Arthur looked up, his own eyes widening slightly as he recognized the face, now older and lined with command, but unmistakably the same. "Billy," Arthur murmured, using a name no one had dared use for the general in 40 years. "Lieutenant Billy Miller." General Miller strode forward, ignoring the stunned sergeant, and clasped Arthur's shoulder. "It's General Miller now, Art. But for you, it's always Billy." He turned to the dumbfounded technicians, his eyes now blazing with a fire they had never seen. "You men have any idea who you've been dismissing?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're mechanics? This man forgot more about keeping engines alive under fire than you'll ever learn from your computers." The general's gaze fell on Kyle, who looked as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "This is Sergeant First Class Arthur Wilson, retired. He was the motor pool chief for the 2nd Infantry Division. He didn't just drive one of these, he rebuilt them in frozen mud in Korea with nothing but a wrench and sheer willpower. I was a brand new lieutenant, pinned down with my platoon, our radio shot to hell. Our only way out was a jeep that had taken 3 rounds to the engine block. We were dead in the water, the hangar was dead silent. The only sound the faint hum of the lights overhead. This man," the general said, his hand still firmly on Arthur's shoulder, "crawled through 100 yards of enemy fire, patched that engine with scrap metal and canteen water, and got it running. He drove us out of there himself. He saved my life and the lives of 12 other men. He did it with his bare hands." The reveal hung in the air, thick and heavy with the weight of history and heroism. The young technicians looked at Arthur, truly seeing him for the first time. They saw not a stooped janitor, but a giant. The worn hands were not a sign of frailty, but of a lifetime of service. The quiet demeanor was not weakness, but the profound humility of a man who had faced true adversity and survived. Kyle Redding's face was a mask of crimson shame. He had mocked a hero. He had dismissed a legend. General Miller turned back to Arthur. "Art," he said softly, "can you make her run?" Arthur simply nodded. The general turned to Kyle. "Sergeant, you and your men will stand back. You will give Mr. Wilson anything he asks for, and you will do it with the respect he is owed. And you will watch. And you will learn without a word." Kyle and his team stepped back, forming a semicircle around the jeep. They watched as Arthur shuffled forward, his movements slow but deliberate. He didn't ask for a diagnostic tool or a power wrench. He asked for a flathead screwdriver, a clean rag, and a small can of gasoline. Arthur approached the Willys not as a machine, but as an old friend. He ran his hand over the hood, a silent greeting. He popped the latches, his movements economical and sure. He didn't look at the whole engine. His eyes went straight to the carburetor. He gently tapped its side with the handle of the screwdriver, a specific rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tappity tap. It was a cadence born of countless hours in the dark and cold, a secret language between man and machine. He unscrewed the top of the air filter, wiped it clean with the rag, and then, taking the can of gas, he poured not into the tank, but a thimbleful directly into the carburetor's throat. "Give her a little taste to wake her up," he murmured to himself. He closed the hood, walked to the driver's side, and slid behind the wheel. He didn't turn the key. Instead, he pulled the choke out exactly halfway, pumped the gas pedal 3 times, no more, no less, and then pressed the floor-mounted starter button. The engine gave a gut-wrenching groan, a metallic cough that sounded just like all the other failures. Kyle almost smirked, a last gasp of his shattered arrogance. But then Arthur, with a patience that seemed infinite, tried again. The engine sputtered, caught for a second, and died. He didn't panic. He simply waited a moment, pushed the choke in a fraction of an inch, and tried once more. A belch of black smoke erupted from the exhaust pipe, followed by a thunderous, magnificent roar as the old engine exploded to life. It wasn't the refined purr of a modern motor. It was a loud, proud, ferocious rumble. The sound of history, of resilience, of victory. The sound of vindication. The glorious noise of the running engine filled the hangar, a testament to a forgotten wisdom. The young technicians stood frozen, their faces a mixture of awe and profound embarrassment. General Miller had tears welling in his eyes, a broad smile spreading across his face. He clapped his hands together, the sound sharp and clear above the engine's roar. Arthur Wilson let the Jeep idle for a moment, his hand resting on the vibrating steering wheel as if feeling the pulse of a living thing. Then he gave the gas a gentle push, and the rumble deepened into a confident thrum. He turned the engine off, and the sudden silence was more impactful than the noise had been. Kyle Redding was the first to move. He walked forward stiffly, stopping in front of Arthur, who was now climbing out of the driver's seat. The young staff sergeant's face was pale, his eyes downcast. He brought his heels together and rendered the sharpest, most sincere salute of his life. "Mr. Wilson, Sergeant," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. I apologize. For my ignorance. For my disrespect. There is no excuse, sir. Thank you." One by one, the other technicians stepped forward and saluted the old janitor, their gestures a silent, powerful admission of their folly. Arthur, a man who had not been saluted in over 50 years, simply looked at them, his gaze soft, and gave a slow, tired nod of acceptance. "Just remember," he said, his voice raspy but clear, "the new ways aren't always better. Sometimes, you just have to listen to what the machine is telling you." The Founders' Day Parade was a resounding success. The old Willys MB Jeep led the procession, its engine humming perfectly, its olive drab paint gleaming in the sun. General Miller had insisted that Arthur ride in the passenger seat of honor. Dressed in a borrowed Class A uniform that hung a little loose on his frame, Arthur Wilson sat tall, his quiet dignity restored. As they passed the reviewing stand, where Colonel Wainwright's family sat, he saw them rise to their feet, their hands over their hearts. He saw the respect in their eyes, and in the eyes of every soldier on that base. The story of the janitor who was a hero had spread like wildfire. From that day on, nothing was the same. The young technicians in the motor pool started a new tradition. The Wilson check before touching any heritage vehicle. They would find Arthur on his rounds, pushing his cart, and they would ask for his advice. He would always stop, listen patiently, and offer a quiet suggestion, which was now treated as gospel. Staff Sergeant Kyle Redding became his most dedicated student, spending his lunch breaks with Arthur, listening to stories about keeping machines alive when the world depended on it. The incident forced a change in the base's culture, a renewed appreciation for the institutional knowledge held by its oldest veterans. Respect, they learned, wasn't about the uniform you wear today, but the service you gave yesterday. It's a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes or stand in the spotlight. Sometimes, they quietly push a broom, carrying the weight of a history we must never forget. The most valuable lessons are often held in the hearts of those who have lived the longest. The final, lingering image from that day wasn't the parade or the accolades, but a simple moment afterward. Arthur Wilson, back in his gray jumpsuit, sharing a cup of coffee with a humbled young sergeant, passing on the wisdom of his generation, ensuring it would never truly be lost. If you believe that true honor is earned through service and that every person deserves our respect regardless of their station in life, subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter.